Okay, welcome to tonight's ATM. It is Monday, January 24th, 2022. And this is the beginning of a new series. Discover the wind beneath your wings. So bring yourself up to standing for a check-in. You will need to have a large bath towel for this lesson. So if you're listening to this post the live lesson, shut it off, go get a bath towel and fold it up that it will be long and thick. So begin by just noticing yourself standing. If you can, come off of your mat so you can be on the direct floor. And let yourself just land. We've had over a month off from regular ATM. There's been many shifts during this time. There's all holiday celebrations, and we're coming back into a new routine. And this lesson is in relationship to the beginning of the Lunar New Year, which is next week. And this lesson often gets titled kind of something about InReverence. And it's a lesson really about the relationship of how your legs, and particularly your pelvis, are intimately related to the quality of width and depth to support your shoulder blades and your arms. Let your arms hang at your side, sense their weight, sense the relationship of how they hang. So there's nothing to fix, correct, or change, but your hands make some relationship to your thighs, right? They either touch or they don't touch, but there's some relationship of your arms to your sides and your hands to your thighs. Does a different part of your hand turn slightly differently and rest against your thigh or against the space between your thigh? Does one arm feel longer, heavier, turn somehow? How does the weight of your head get supported through the ring of your clavicles and your sternum and your shoulder blades? And how does that ring get supported over the ring of your pelvis and your sacrum and your pubis? And how does that ring get supported through the feet and the interaction through the earth? And you just sense the shape of your lumbar spine and the shape of your pelvis. You could even put your hands on the top of the iliac crest, right? People say they put their hands on their hips. So that's the wide part at the top, the flare of the pelvis, that's it. People often say, put my hands on my hips, but it's actually not your hips, it's the top of your pelvis. And just the hands, just the web space of the thumb and the index finger just fit there. And you just let the elbows kind of drop and just let the hands just sort of they just land and fit across the top of the pelvis. Yeah. And you just feel where the elbows rest in space. Do you feel turned? Does one elbow orient a bit more forwards or backwards? How wide can the scapula be able to just comfortably rest? And just gently keeping your hands on your pelvis, just gently roll your elbows in a little bit forwards. So they roll forwards, like you're tipping them forwards. And then tip them back a little bit. Have it lead from your elbows. That's it. Your chest will move, but lead with your elbows coming towards each other in front of you. They're not going to touch. And then towards each other behind you, and they're not going to touch. It's not about stretching, but you just sense like how free is your scapula and how related is this movement that you initiate with your elbows to your scapula and your pelvis. That's it. And just let your arms hang again. And now, after having done that simple little check-in movement, you just sense the shape of your pelvis again. And just a little bit Shift your weight really slowly and gradually towards the forefoot of both feet. So you shift forwards on both feet. You're not trying to lift your heels, but you're just shifting forwards. And you just feel like, where's their effort in you? And a little bit you shift backwards. And feel how responsive is your spine. Do you have a tendency to go towards locking something? Can you let your knees be soft? And then take a little walk. Let's walk around your space for a moment. Sense how it is that you move, how your arms swing, what you sense that's interesting in the transfer of weight from your feet up through the legs, through the pelvis. And again, like, how much awareness do you have about the actual movement of the relationship of your scapulas and your pelvis, your shoulder blades and your pelvis? So we know they're both on the scapulas are on the back side of us, and there is the back of the pelvis. Good. Come to lie on your back. Let your arms and legs down long. If you need something under your knees, you certainly can use it. That looks nice. I can see everyone. And sense your relationship to the ground. So just a moment ago, you were standing, you brought your elbows forwards and backwards, and it changed often the sense of the relationship of how wide your shoulder blades move apart from each other and how close they can come together. Like, sense that now. Like, do your shoulder blades rest? Like, how do you know how close or far they are from each other? There's no perfect place where they're supposed to be, but we often glue the scapula to the trunk and, sort of chunk our whole trunk, the rib cage, the scapula. There's very little differentiated movement for most people. Very gently bend your knees and let your feet come to standing. Just sense, how do you do it? Which one do you bend first? And both knees are bent, your feet are flat. And gently take your hands and bring them together, palm to palm, finger to finger, in front of your chest, like a prayer position. So everyone knows the sort of universal symbol of the prayer, right? We even have an emoji for it in the world today. And so just see, like, how lightly can you bring the hands together and just let the fingers meet, and then to maybe bring them apart a little bit, just a couple times, just bring them together and bring apart, and see, can you just let them come together without pushing, right? So it's not about pushing the hands together. And yeah, so you could bring them apart as much as you want to. You could bring them a little ways, or you could bring them a little bit further, and just feel, if you bring your hands apart, obviously your elbows are going to move. And so find how lightly you can let your hands come together. And so the heels of the hand are touching, the fingers are lined up, and it creates a certain bend in your wrist, and it creates a certain relationship of where your elbows go in space, right? Now, can you begin gently to direct? So in this lesson, the fingertips, can you direct the fingertips in the direction upwards? That's in the direction of towards the top of your mat. Okay, it's not towards the ceiling. That's it. So you have to turn so that the fingers go towards the top of your head, or over your head, or towards the top of your mat. That's the up I'm talking about. It's the universal up. It's not towards the ceiling. That's actually forwards. as far as your alligator brain is concerned. That's it. So now with your fingers, so in this lesson, the fingers are always going to be pointing not towards the ceiling. They're pointing up, and begin to slide, keeping the prayer position, begin to slide your arms in a direction upwards, just very gently. You're not trying to stretch, and your elbows will move. Your fingers stay together. You're not stretching, and then begin to orient your hands down. And just come from your chest to up a few times. So it's like they're in a plane parallel to your body. And just feel, how do the elbows move as the arms go further up over your head? You're not trying to get as far as you can. The fingers stay pointing up towards the top of the mat, not towards the ceiling. So they stay pointed up towards the top of the mat. And when you come back down, the fingers still stay pointed up towards the top of the mat. Right? And you go up and down a few times this way. And sense, what do the elbows do as you come up? Do the elbows come closer together, or do they go further apart? If the sort of prayer position stays in this track that's more or less always the same, right? The fingertips are pointing up towards the wall above your head. And then as you come down, the heels of the hand begin to direct down and come up over the top of the head. And now, as you begin to cross across that center part of your chest where you started, keeping the fingers pointing up, bring the heels of the hand down more towards your pelvis, more towards your belly. So the fingers don't turn towards the ceiling. They stay pointing up. The heels of the hand may come away from each other as you go further down. So you find this kind of track where you're sliding your prayer position in a rhythmical, smooth, gentle, non-trying to stretch way above you and in the direction towards going down. And feel, when do your elbows come closer together and when do they move apart? Notice as you come down, the elbows come apart. And you feel the relationship that goes on in your scapula by what's happening in your elbows. So when your elbows come together, what's happening at your scapula? Because you're lying on it. And that's it as you come down. So you do a few, you rest, you do a few. And now just everyone rest. Let your legs down. Let everything come to a length. Rest, maybe having contact against the floor. Sense what's different. Sense the amount of space behind your lumbar spine in the lordosis, the arch behind your low back, and the amount of space behind your cervical spine. So the arches in your lumbar and cervical spine have something to do with the roundness of the thoracic spine and the shape of the scapula resting on top of the ribs that connect to the thoracic spine. Now slowly bend your knees And one more time, so we're going to always come to the same prayer position with and continue to reduce the effort between the hands and in the arms. Bring the same prayer position over your chest and begin to guide the arms up. The fingers always stay in the direction upwards. And feel, can you recognize that as the prayer position begins to go up, it influences the arches behind your lumbar spine and your cervical spine? And then as you slide the sort of the track of the prayer down and the elbows come apart a little bit, try to keep at least part of your finger still touching. The heels of the hands may come away a little bit, but generally you don't bring your hands completely away. And feel, as your hands come down and come closer and the elbows come apart, can you let your back round and flatten into the ground a little bit? And then as the track of the prayer goes up in the direction over your head, can you let that movement slightly begin to arch your lumbar spine? And it will have an influence on your thoracic spine. So the initiation of the action is your arms. The resultant movement in the back is a following movement here in this lesson. Now, that's not always the case in all lessons, but in this lesson, that is the case. That's it. See if you can coordinate a feeling that there's a ripple, there's an undulation, and there's a movement towards extension in the spine when the arms go up. And there's a movement towards flexion, and that feels like you flatten and round into the ground when you go down. That's it. And your legs are doing what they're doing. See, how do they assist? Good. Come down and rest. Let everything down, take a full rest. Sense the shape that you make against the ground. Gently roll your head from side to side. And you may already know something in what we've done so far about whether there's a little bit of a tendency for it to be easier for that prayer track to move through a little bit more easily or fluidly through the right side or through the left side. For most people, there's a difference. Or even if just one scapula is easier to feel than the other. So as your head turns, you might know something about whether it's just easier to access rotation in the direction rightwards, not just of your neck, but through your whole self, or to access rotation in the direction leftwards. So rolling your head is not just about your neck. Okay, good. Now, bend your knees gently, do it in a smooth way. Notice, how do you do it? Do you always lead with the same leg first? Do you bring both legs up? Do your legs turn out as they come up? What happens? Now, gently let your right leg down long, keep your left leg bent. Okay, so it's an asymmetrical position. Your right leg is long. If you need to put something under the knee, you can. Your left leg is standing. Bring your hands to the prayer position. And now, with your left leg standing, begin to track your prayer position up and down again. So up and down are always the same. It's in the direction over your head. And see what you can do to feel that you could track this in a way that it naturally would let you roll or turn in a natural, really gradual kind of way, a little bit more to the right. It's like, can this prayer position begin to study a little bit more of like a turn? Or sometimes I use the analogy, like if you're an iron, you'd be ironing a little bit more the ground underneath your right side. So you'll use your left leg in some way that assists that. But see, the initiation of the action is still this reverent prayer position that is very rhythmical, and it invites a global flexion and extension pattern through the spine. But it's interesting when you put one leg down, how it invites you to turn a little bit. So it's almost like the prayer position is just highlighting the sense through the right side. So if you're the ground is feeling there's more contact through the right side. That's nice. And can that be coordinated through your legs? So it's never trying to stretch more. It's about coordinating. Good. And then rest. And very gently switch your legs, but do it in a way that the switch moves up through your chest. So as one goes up, the other goes down, and you let that ripple up through the chest. Now the right leg is standing and the left leg is long. And put something under the left knee if you need to. And bring the hands just into a prayer position over the chest and just rest there for a second and just notice, is it different when one leg is standing? Like, do you have a tendency to push more with one hand into the other hand? Can you stand more clearly through your right leg, or could you stand more clearly through your left? So the initiation of the action is always the prayer track movement. So you track the prayer movement up, and you begin to wonder, could that prayer movement as you extend when you come up somehow relate somehow through your leg? That you feel that there's a slight natural, slight is the operative word there, turn that takes you towards the left. And it begins to allow you to iron through the left side a little bit. Like what do you do with your leg that assists that? It's primarily what do you do with your right leg, but yet your left leg has to do something too, and your whole pelvis does something. That's beautiful. Nice. Yeah, you always just rest when you need to. You can imagine movements. It's a very rhythmical movement, but it's really about not just doing it repetitively, about keep refining it. Good. Now let everything down, take a full rest. So it's very different when you bring one leg standing and the other long, because it's an asymmetrical organization. And whenever we create an asymmetrical organization like that, it's always going to create rotation. When both legs are bent, it creates a more symmetrical position, which creates a more bilateral. It actually creates an older movement pattern in us. It's a less differentiated movement pattern. Rotation is a higher, more complex movement than flexion extension are. That doesn't mean it's more important. It's just that it's built on those more foundational movements. So now smoothly feeling how you will turn and rotate, and feel as you do this, feel what happens between the shoulder blades on the back side of you as you do this action. So you have to go slow enough. So attend as you roll to your side and come up to sitting. How does the shape of your chest change? When do your shoulder blades come away from each other more, or one moves more or less towards? And sit with the soles of your feet facing each other on your blanket. So you take your folded blanket and you put it under your pelvis so that it raises you up, right? It makes you higher. So you'll tip, right? Your pelvis will tip the tiniest little bit because you're on this blanket, right? There's going to be a little bit of a tip. So it makes your sitting bones, it makes your hips be a little higher than your knees. And you turn your legs so that the soles of the feet face towards each other, similar to how the hands face towards each other, right? Now, that doesn't mean you have to pull the soles of your feet way up towards your groin. They can be quite a ways out away from you, right? Wherever it's comfortable, and they don't have to stay exactly touching. And so you find the height of your towel that makes it be possible for you to be there without weight bearing your hands behind you. So if it's really difficult, you may have to make your towel higher if you really feel that you really have fallen back a lot into flexion. Yeah, then the thing to do is to make your towel be a little higher. Don't double it, but make it higher. Okay, great. Now, soles of the feet are facing towards each other. Bring your prayer position. Your fingers are always pointing up towards the top of your head, which happens to be the ceiling now, right? But we're orienting towards the top of your head and above your head. And now begin your prayer track up, and notice, can you let that prayer track very gently begin to allow the arch of your back to extend a little bit? And notice how does the weight shift on your sitting bones? And you then just bring the hands back down to a resting central position of your chest. Don't go into flexion, just go into extension here to start out with, right? So you're just bringing the prayer up and feeling what happens at your pelvis and how there's a natural movement towards increasing the arch, the concavity in the lumbar spine. But it's not because you force the lumbar spine to push. It's that this very gentle movement. And you could let the eyes look in the direction of the hands. They begin to look up, and the pelvis must shift. How does the weight shift on the pelvis? So it's not straining the eyes. The eyes are just looking in the direction upwards. You know, it's like, and to really have this sense of reverence. It's like, right, this sense of evoking a curiosity that's gentle into moving up. And then rest the hands, stay in sitting with the soles of the feet together, or the feet, whichever. And just play with how far is it most comfortable to bring the heels, the feet towards the groin. You can just play, like move them out a little bit further, move them in a little bit further. Find out where's the place where you have the most freedom in your pelvis. And you might not know that until you start the prayer track again, and then you can change it. Now, wherever you've decided that is the best place, bring your prayer track back in, and now begin to bring your prayer down towards the pubis and let the elbows move apart, and feel how the weight shifts back on your pelvis and you round, right? Your low back rounds more, and so does your thoracic spine. And then just come back up to the resting position and just go in this downward movement. So the finger still point up to the ceiling, but the prayer track moves down towards the pubis. And feel what has to happen between the shoulder blades. As the back rounds, can you feel the scapula have to move apart from each other? The knees will be doing something. The hips will be doing something. And then put them together. Prayer track up, feel how the weight shifts forwards on the sitting bones. And the lumbar spine creates a little bit more concavity. That's beautiful. And then bring it down directly through the center and see if you can coordinate so that it's not this thing you do with your weight shift in your back and then this separate thing that you do with your hands. And then your breath might have something to do with the coordination process. See, when do you inhale naturally? Beautiful. When do you exhale? Go slow. There's a real tendency to want to like get up to the top and then sort of pause and hold and then go fast. It's not like a sun salutation. So it's very universally what Feldenkrais calls don't accelerate, don't decelerate. It's continuous speed. That's beautiful. Feel the rounding and arching in the lumbar and cervical spine and how that influences the scapula. That's beautiful. Okay, good. Now, just rest for a second, sitting with the soles of the feet together. Let the hands down. And just feel, where do you rest on the sitting bones? I didn't draw your attention directly to it in the beginning, but you can tell if you rest in a different place. Now, without collapsing and falling onto your back, how can you gently roll to a side and come onto your back and feel, can the scapula remain sort of lubricated between or on the rib cage, right? Can you go however you go to your side and roll over there and come onto your back and not glue your scapula to your ribs as you do it? It's such a funny thing because we're so used to it that it's such a novel understanding that we often don't know what we're looking for. If you can, rest with your legs long, your arms long. Sense what you notice about what's different for you and how you lie. Sense the shape of contact, the relationship between now the shape of the back of your pelvis and the back of your thoracic spine, which includes how do your scapula rest. Can you feel any of the spine more clearly between the shoulder blades? Can you feel if the concavities of the lumbar spine and the cervical spine have shifted? This lesson does a huge relationship of relating to our center line, right? So a moment ago when you were on your back and we did this prayer slide up and down, we did it more to the right and we did it more to the left. Just feel right now, is there more weight? Is there more of a tendency in the spine to be able to more easily globally turn in the direction rightwards or the leftwards? And how do you know that? It's not just by where the contact is, it's something deeper. It's feeling deep into the vertebrae, the body of the vertebrae. So gently turn your head and feel if it's true. Does the spine connect more when you roll your head to the right or to the left? And does the pelvis want to move in the direction of the head or differently? You have to go really slow in order to attend to that. It's usually easier for us to tell which way the pelvis wants to go than it is to feel how the scapula move. You can usually tell how the front of the shoulders move, but it's harder to feel. Like, does one scapula glide or turn or shift somehow when the head is turning? I'm going to be exploring a lot about this relationship in this series. Okay, good. And then rest. Now, slowly, we're going to come up into a kneeling position. So it's what we call tall kneeling. And you can just do a little bit. If it's too much, you can come back and sit again with the soles of the feet, or you could come back and lie. So whatever movements we do in kneeling, you can do in sole of the foot sitting, or you can do in lying. So you do what you can that's comfortable, as long as you keep the quality easy. So roll to your side and bring yourself up to kneeling. So that means you put your blanket there enough that it pads your knees and your pelvis remains high, right? So you're not kneeling. Yeah, you're not kneeling with your pelvis back on your heels, right? Put your rolled up blanket under your knees and kneel with your, what we call your pelvis high. So your pelvis is not sitting back towards your heels, right? And bring your knees a little wider than where you would, like if your knees are feet, your feet wouldn't be directly under your hips. They'd be a little wider. So it gives you a little bit wider base of support. That's it. So you're fully kneeling and your pelvis is up. It's not on your heels. Yeah, you're fully kneeling. That's it. So there's distance between your pelvis and your heels, right? You could sit back on your heels, and that would also be called kneeling, but we call that low kneeling, okay? But this high kneeling, your pelvis is up. Good. Now, there's different things you can do. So could you let your ankles be long and the weight rests on the backs of your toes, right? Along the dorsum, the part of your toe that sits up into a shoe, right? Your ankle remains extended. Or you could pull your toes up underneath of you. Feldenkrais would always say, move your toes under as if for running, like you were in a runner's start thing, whatever those are called, starting machines. And just feel the difference. If you let your feet go long and they rest, it'll change your balance for sure if you pull your toes under. And just as you just gently, you can bring both of the toes under and then let them go long, and feel it will influence the shape of your back. That's it. Now, leave the toes long, right? So you let the ankles extend. It gives you a wider base, and put your hands into the prayer position. So if you're on your back, you just put your hands into the prayer position and begin now very gently. It's not stretching. Begin to orient your prayer up again in the direction of the sky, and feel. Now it's very different when you're kneeling, that the amount of range of motion, a little change will make a bigger ripple. Now, if you're lying, have your knees bent so you can use both legs, and attend as you're kneeling. Now, where does your pelvis move as your hands go up? Which direction in space does your pelvis move? Your pelvis, feel how your pelvis moves. Yes, your lumbar spine and the shape of your spine changes, but where does your pelvis go? That's it. And you're just going up with the prayer position and down to the chest level. That's beautiful. And your eyes could follow it gently and play with it a little bit. Go a little bit more towards one side. So if you're lying and you have both knees bent and you go a little bit towards one side, it's fine. Keep both knees bent, but just use one leg a little bit more than the other. That's it. So now if you're kneeling, feel, can you go over to the right side and feel that one side of the pelvis will move more forwards and one side will move more back? And there's a mimic of something that goes on in your scapula. So there's this kind of reverence of turning in the direction rightwards and coming down in the center. You use your breath to help you, and then to the other. That's it. Good. Now bring everything back, and gently, without falling, use some sort of a spiral rotation and bring yourself down to the floor to rest on your back. Yeah, if you don't need the blanket or the towel underneath your knees, don't use it. It's fine if you need it, but if you don't need it, don't use it. If you need it under your knees or under your head, then fine. Lie comfortably long, arms and legs, and sense what this does to finding your center line and feeling the relationship of these very primal flexion and extension patterning. And how there's this global kind of relationship through your spine. As your spine extends, there's something that happens in your breath, your scapulas move, and it's related to this very movement that takes us up. And then there's a flexion movement that rounds us and takes us down. And they're both such beautifully valid movements. One is not better or worse than the other. We need both of them for full human function. And feel how this influences the shape of your spine, the shape of the relationship of your scapulas with the floor. Just come and bring your hands into the prayer position over your chest. Keep your legs long. And just since this is the first thing we started with, right? We did it with your knees bent, but just bring your hands apart and together a little bit over your chest and just find out, can they be even softer? Could your prayer be even softer? And you just bring them together. And feel as the hands come together, something if you subtly move your hands, something happens on the back side of you. You subtly bring your hands apart and feel, yeah. You feel like, what does the scapula do? Because obviously you're not just bringing your hands apart, your elbows are lifted. And with your legs long, it's different than with your legs bent. Bend your knees. Put your feet flat and do the same thing. Just play with bringing your hands together and apart with your knees bent. You'll utilize the ground and your pelvis differently. And just come back now to do the prayer. You can let your arms rest at your side for a second if you want to. And then when you're ready, keep your knees bent and do your prayer track up and down and lying. And you can play now with both knees bent. You can come up the center, you could go to a side, you can go all the way up, come all the way down. And you do it how you do it. Let the movement guide you, your curiosity guide you, as long as it feels connected and smooth and reducing effort. And feel the coordination of the legs and the pelvis through the spine to this sort of bellowing movement that happens of the elbows. The elbows bellow together and they bellows apart. The fingers, the prayer always goes up. The fingertips go up. Is it more clear to turn in the direction rightwards or leftwards? Is it easier to connect somehow? A very gentle pressing through your right leg that irons kind of out more one side, or through your left leg? If you press through your right leg, it rolls your left. If you press through your left leg, it rolls you right a little bit. Your head is free. You feel the rounding and arching of the lumbar spine and the whole spine. Good. Now gently roll to your side, come to soles of the feet sitting, and generally have the soles together more away from your groin, right? Like don't pull the soles of the feet in really far to your groin. Yeah, have them wider. That's it. And prayer position. And now begin to let this movement become a little bit larger, but do it gradually. So you'll prayer position up and feel the gentle concavity that begins in the lumbar spine, and you're looking up, and the weight rolls forwards on your pelvis. And then begin to prayer down and feel the rounding of your back. Your head goes down and you look almost like down and under your pubis. And you can, again, you go a little to this side, to that side, and feel how beautiful that you can coordinate it. And you'll find that there will likely be a pattern with your breath. There's no right or wrong way, but probably you'll settle into something. So whatever, that's beautiful. And you're in the trunk turns the head and the head supports. And you feel that everything is free. There's a gliding factor that's present in your pelvis and your sacrum and your scapula. That's it. And there's kind of a bellowings movement that gets echoed in your knees to your elbows. Just feel that. Nice. Good. Then gently use this prayer position to somehow roll you over to a side and come to your back. How do you do it? How do you roll over there? And then eventually your hands have to come out of the prayer position, right? And sort of pour yourself over to one side onto your back and rest. Arms and legs down long. Take a moment. Sense what you're curious about and how you allow the ground to support you now. Sense the quality of your breathing, quality of the noting and the functioning of the mind. Can there be more calm? It's a paradox often that you can feel more focused and more expansive at the same time. Gently roll your head from side to side. Sense what's curious about how much of you is engaged in that action now. So rolling your head to side, you move through the center. So it's funny how something about the center defines the periphery and something about the periphery defines the center. So the periphery means that you're turning away from center. But it's not just your head. The whole vertebral bodies of all the spinal vertebrae, all the way down to the sacrum and coccyx turn. That invites the pelvis to turn, the legs turn. Good. So for the last iteration of this, if you can, roll to your side and come up to tall kneeling. So it's the same kneeling that we were in. Use your blanket under your knees and have your ankles be extended, right? So your feet are long. If you don't bring yourself to kneeling and you're on your back and you can, put your feet flat. Bend both knees, put your feet flat. And now you're in tall kneeling, come to your prayer position. And now begin to bring your prayer position down and let your back round backwards and feel that it's almost like you begin to bow, right? And then you begin to slide your prayer along the central track and going up. Your fingers are always pointing up. That's it. Fingers are pointing up. That's it. And you begin that prayer all the way in the direction upwards, just gently, no stretching, and feeling the arching of the back, and then coming downwards and letting the back round to where you could even begin to soften and let the sitting bones move a little bit more back towards the heels. And you come closer to the floor. Maybe even you come to the place that the palms could rest on the floor. You're not trying to put them there. And then out of the floor, you grow the prayer up the center and feel it doesn't have to be exactly in the center. You could take it to the side, but let yourself come all the way into a full flexion towards the floor. You could even, if it's possible, even let yourself round to where your head comes closer to the floor. That's beautiful. And then you scoop up the hands together into the prayer position out of the floor and bring it up to the ceiling. That's beautiful. So you're not trying to put anything anywhere. It's just if it's possible. That's nice. And feel what the relationship of the pelvis and the scapula is. A well-oiled ease. So if you're not in this position, you can be imagining the feeling again of the rounding and arching of your back, wherever you're on your back or your side. That's beautiful. And then bring yourself to your back for a final rest. Well, there's many iterations that you can already understand could be included in this lesson. Like, it might be interesting sometime tonight before you go to sleep is to put yourself back in kneeling for just a minute or two and to do these movements with your toes under and to feel what the difference is when your toes are long behind you and your ankles extended and when your toes are under and your ankles more flexed. Feel the impact that that has on the movement. So I'll tell you that it will be impactful and it will change it. And that's fine. It's not, if it makes it less in some areas, it's not wrong. Changing the orientation of the ankle is going to change the orientation all the way through. What would happen if one foot was back and one foot had your toes back and one foot had your toes under? Rest, see what you notice. And do one final reference check-in here. Bend your knees, bring your hands to the prayer position, the very first movement we did, and just notice how gently they can come together. And just prayer yourself up and down a couple of times from lying and just see how that's changed now from the very beginning, from having done these things in sitting and kneeling and lying, how your orientation to the ground changes and how being up in a different position makes you aware of something more from here. Good. Let everything rest. Take every arms and legs down long. Sense that distance between your shoulder blades. And it's even kind of a funny thing, but the width or the distance between your two SI joints, which is the distance or the width of the back of your pelvis. Gently roll your head from side to side. And just rest. And take the quality of this lesson. It's you can see a way we call it in reverence, right? There's a reverent quality to this kind of repetitive, natural movement towards sky and towards ground. Take the quality of this reverence and roll and spiral yourself up to standing. However you get there. Come to standing and be off of your mat. If that's how you were in the beginning. If you weren't, then come to the same orientation and sense what you notice about what's different. So one of the first things we noted in standing in the beginning was, how do your arms hang, right? Like, what's the weight of them, the length of them, and where do they rest relative to your thighs? It's an interesting thing. Do they rest in a way that your hands are relatively more forwards of your thighs or backwards? Because it's not just your hands. It's like that has something to do with where your scapulas rest, where your clavicles and your shoulders turn, and where your head rests over those rings. Sense the distance between the scapula and the SI joints and the width of the back of you, the width of the front of you. Very gently take your hands and put them on the top of your iliac crest, right? The top of your pelvis, like we did in the beginning. And just very gently, if these were wings, bring your elbows towards each other in the front and feel if this is different. And towards each other in the back, and feel that this invites a similar kind of organization of a concavity and a convexity. And notice if this action of your arms is just more integral now with your spine. It's like it's not your arms separate from your spine. and it's integral of your head and neck. That's it. Let your arms down. Take a little walk. So this lesson is done in dedication for the darkest time of the lunar cycle and the beginning of that Lunar New Year next year. So you can take this quality into this week and see what shows up for you. So enjoy your evening, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.